I found out the most popular booktuber, one of my favorite YouTubers, lives in my city. So I've decided to read Haley Pham's 5-star books. We have similar tastes in books, so I'm going to be very critical and let you know if her book recs live up to the hype. I actually happen to have Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter on my bookshelf. One of Haley's all-time favorite reads, apparently. I have not read it, but I've been anticipating this read for a long time, so much so that I actually started reading this book before I filmed the intro to this video, and I'm about 150 pages in so far. All I knew going into this read is that it's childhood friends to lovers, and it has a very cute cover. You know it's getting serious when I'm pulling out my annotating tabs, and yes, it is about to be one of those reads. It's pretty late, but I finished Better Than the Movies. In this rom-com about rom-coms, Liz, a hopeless romantic teen, tries to secure her happily ever after moment with her forever crush, but is reluctantly drawn to the boy next door. Together, her and her neighbor Wes scheme to get Liz noticed by her dream boy. But as they plot, Liz begins to enjoy Wes's company a little too much and rethinks what her idea of a happily ever after should look like. Sometimes we get so tied up in our idea of what we think we want that we miss out on the amazingness of what we could actually have. That was one of the central ideas in this book, and Liz was so focused on this dream boy that she almost missed her actual dream boy walking right in front of her. I think that's a good life lesson. You don't know what you have until you lose it, until you almost lose it in the case of this book, and sometimes you just have to open your eyes and open your perspective and know that your idea of love, your idea of like who your perfect match is in your head isn't always who your perfect match is in reality. And if you keep yourself closed off to like, oh, I'm only gonna go for this one person who I really like and I'm really fixated on, you're closing your options off to completely, like, you could find someone better, you could find someone more fitting out there, but you just don't know because you're so fixated on this one idea of love. And I think it's a beautiful message within this book. Do you realize we could have been doing this for years if you weren't such a pain in the butt? Nah, I didn't like you until recently. Enemies to lovers, it's our trope. You poor confused little lover. Now, I think it's really hard to do a good enemies to lovers in a high school romance. I feel like enemies to lovers is easier done in a fantasy where, you know, people are at war with each other, when people are like holding daggers to each other's throats. That's what I think of when I think of enemies to lovers. And this isn't quite that, obviously, because it's high school. Like, it's just a romance novel. There's no fantasy, no sci-fi, just a high school love story. And I think that this little, I'd almost label it like a rival to lovers, because Wes is a prankster. He's been pranking Liz, like slightly terrorizing her since childhood. I wouldn't say it's a full-blown enemies to lovers, but for the high school enemies to lovers, whatever you make of that, I think it is really well done. They do the trope so well. She's not you. What? She isn't you. That is my favorite line, my favorite 3 lines in this whole novel. She isn't you. That's iconic. I think I'd seen the annotations for that, which I highlighted that a few times. I've tabbed it up, but I think I'd seen annotations for that part of this book just from other people. It's one of my favorite parts, if not my favorite part of this entire read. It's just such a cute series of lines right there. She isn't you. That's amazing. I love it. So adorable. I loved this book so much. I recommended it to multiple friends the minute I flipped the last page. It was such a fun story about friendship and finding your true love. The pacing is perfect. Genuinely could not have been better, and the complexity of the characters was admirable. Lynn Painter, if you ever watched this video, this book was a masterpiece. The tension between the characters was amazing. 10 out of 10 banter, 10 out of 10 character development. Wes, I can see why you are the blueprint for high school book boyfriends. Everything he did for Liz in this novel and how he spoke of her was swoon-worthy. If you like rom-coms, this book is perfect for you. It has multiple references to music, movies, and other novels about romance. This book makes me want to develop a friendship with someone, grow with them, and then one day look down at them and go, oh, it's you. You're my person. This was most definitely a 5-star read for me, and if I'm being completely honest, it was in my top 5 favorite books ever. Now, that just means that the next book I pick up has a very high bar to meet. Haley's next 5-star book rec is The 7-Year Slip, which I do not have on my shelf. And honestly, I don't know anything about it, but I've heard the title before and it kind of sounds like a second chance romance novel. Time to pick it up from the bookstore and find out. Book acquired. I finished The 7-Year Slip, and let me tell you, I flew. No, I soared through the second half of this book. This story is about an overworked book publicist who falls in love with her temporary roommate, only to discover that he lives years in the past. 7 to be exact. I went on so many dates. I kissed so many people. I tried to fall in love again and again, and all I could think about was you. Now, this book has a trope that I think more books need, and it's the fact that this male protagonist of ours yearns for our female protagonist. Ewan yearns for Clementine, and I don't use that word lightly. This man very much, like, from the first initial meetings of this girl, was like, I love every second with this person. I am like transported to a different world when I am with them. And it's just a really beautiful trope. It's a really beautiful thing to see, and I think it's something that everyone as a reader is like, yeah, I would love if my partner was yearning for me. Not just in love, but just yearned for me. Sometimes the people you loved left you halfway through a story. Sometimes they left you without a goodbye. And sometimes they stayed around in little ways. In the memory of a musical, in the smell of their perfume, in the sound of the rain, in the itch for adventure, in the yearning for that of liminal space between one airport terminal and the next. I hated her for leaving, and I loved her for staying as long as she could, and I would never wish this pain on anyone. Now, I think this book handles grief so well. That is like the big theme throughout this book, because Clementine is grieving in this novel. And I think the way that they go about explaining like the stages of grief, I think the way they go about explaining just like how it's okay to grieve and how it's okay to fall apart and like not be okay with losing someone is really well done, because I feel like a lot of times grief is a theme, it's glazed over in a lot of books. I feel like it's not really fleshed out the way it should be, not in a realistic way. And that's something that I think this book just does a really good job of. I feel like it really does flesh out the grief in a way that's realistic, and it, you know, is a good message that you're allowed to cry, you're allowed to break down, you're allowed to take as long as you need to process losing someone important to you, because it's hard. I didn't need to be fixed. I just needed to be reminded that I was human. And this line also piggybacks on that theme of grief that I think was just so well done in this novel. And that moment was like, wow, this like really hardworking, independent person is realizing that, yeah, I'm human, and sometimes I need to rest, sometimes I need to cry, sometimes I need to just fall into someone's arms, and that is completely okay. Overall, this book was great. It was cute and definitely one of a kind. I really felt myself getting attached to the protagonist and was very satisfied when I closed the book. Now, the first half felt a little faulty to me with the confusion of how the apartment works and the magic in general. But come the second half, I was completely immersed and understood why this book received such high praise. At the end, I genuinely felt like I didn't need to know how the magic system worked and how the apartment flashed her back 7 years. I think if that would have been explained or fleshed out anymore, or like her aunt would have said something about it, it would have felt really cheesy. I don't think it would have worked as well. So I think that remaining a mystery and just being a part of the story that like no one knows how that magic works, probably a good thing. Now, the love story between Ewan and Clementine, I adore them. I'm normally not a big fan of insta love, but Ashley Poston used this trope flawlessly. It felt like the moment they met, both parties subconsciously knew, oh, it's you, you're my person. So without further ado, the moment you've all been waiting for, do I think The 7-Year Slip is a 5-star read? I do not. I'm sorry, Haley, I don't quite agree with you there. Because of the first half of the book and it taking me a minute to get into the read, I'm gonna leave this one with a 4-star review. But a 5-star read and a 4-star read, Haley, I need you to pick out more books for me because you have amazing taste in romantic comedies. Now, if any of you have a 5-star book that you want me to read, let me know in the comments. And if you need any more worthwhile book recs, check out my video from last week where I read 100 books and ranked the best ones.